starting this video in the car again. And I don't know why this seems kind of like foggy-ish. It's a really gray day outside, so that's probably why. Or it could just be my phone, who knows. I don't have an update. Just welcome to this week's recent reads. I don't have an update. I genuinely do not have an update. I don't have an update because I haven't finished anything this week. I just wanted to come in really quick and do this introduction and let y'all know that I am reading the Lesbiana's Guide to Catholic School, and I'm about 15% into that. And literally, I feel like that is the only thing that I have to tell you because it's already been a hectic week, and today's Tuesday, I think. It's Tuesday. It's only Tuesday. And it's hectic already. But yeah, I am currently reading that. I did not get a chance to read anything physically last night the way I wanted to. I did a workout last night, and holy crap. My upper body, like my arms hurt so bad. Like, can't lift my arms, don't want to stretch them. They're extremely sore type of hard. And it kind of like wore me out last night, so I went to bed pretty early. Went to bed watching Heartstopper, which I still have not finished episodes 7 and 8. I am not going to watch those last few episodes. I messed around and watched episodes 5 and 6. I was supposed to wait to watch those with my patrons, and so in order to stop myself, I was like, I'm just going to start from the beginning again, and then I messed around and watched 5 and 6, but I'm going to try to save 7 and 8 so my patrons and I can watch it together, because we did watch the first 4 episodes together. But that's it, y'all. Like, this is one of those ones where it's kind of like, haven't read anything yet, but just wanted to go ahead and get this ball rolling for the recent reads. Hey y'all, so I've been horrible at updating. This has just been a very long week, a lot going on, and so I haven't had the chance to update, but I have done a lot of reading and I've finished quite a number of things. So let's go ahead, because this clip is probably going to be a little on the longer side. The first thing that I ended up finishing this week so far was the Lesbiana's Guide to Catholic School, which is a new release. It is about a young girl who ends up having to go to public school. She's not out to anybody. So she's not out to her mom, And it was a really weird situation that happened between her and her best friend, because her best friend found out that she was gay and then outed her. So she ends up going to this Catholic school with her brother. And it really is about them like just trying to go to this Catholic school that apparently is predominantly white. So they do experience some racist remarks. I think my favorite aspects about this book is that when our main character gets to the school, like, she doesn't really expect to find friends, and she does. And she makes this incredible secondary character who ends up being the love interest. And I think just watching their romance develop was really, really interesting. I think that also watching the bond that she had with her brother was excellent. I mean, that was probably like the highlight of all this, is that her and her brother are really, really close, and they both are struggling with a lot. Namely, her, like, they both have this fear of their parents. Their parents are very traditional. Their parents are Catholic, and she is basically working during the book to save up money in order to make sure that if she gets kicked out, which she's pretty sure, like, if she comes out to her mom, she's going to get kicked out. She wants to make sure that she has enough money that if she gets kicked out, she'll be prepared, you know, to have a place to stay and stuff like that. And her dad's not really in the picture because they went to a protest and he ended up getting deported, and so he's not really around like that. And so it's just them and their mom, and it's a lot of reveals in the book that I don't want to go through. But I will say, like, the brother-sister relationship is, I don't know if I've ever read anything like that in YA. And so really getting the opportunity to see this relationship develop, how close they are and how much they trust each other, and then like the disappointments and the failures of both of them towards each other, it was just really good. This definitely has content warnings for racism, for homophobia. There is mental illness representation, there's suicidal ideation, and it's not really a suicide attempt on page. It's kind of insinuated that we have a character that was really, really thinking about it and was struggling with that suicidal ideation. And so that's just thinking about that, you know, going into this book. But it definitely was like a 4.5 star read for me. It was so, so good. And I loved listening to it on audio. I think the way that everything worked out and how everything plays out with like the relationships with our main characters, and not only like their brother-sister relationship, but the relationships that they have with secondary characters is really good. I think the representation was done really well. And I can't remember if this is this author's debut book or not, but if it is, it was done beautifully, and I cannot wait to see what they do in the future. So if you have not had the opportunity to check out The Lesbiana's Guide to Catholic School, I highly, highly, highly recommend it. I am also in the middle of trying to get through Katie Roberts' Wicked Villain series. So I did end up finishing Learn My Lessons, which is a throuple, which is a relationship between Hercules, Hades, and Meg. And it begins with Hercules working at this restaurant. And so there was this kind of setup between Hercules and Meg the setup between Meg and Hades to get Hercules, and he doesn't realize that it is a setup. And so they rope him in. And the thing about this one is that like the scenes that were in it, in terms of like it being a romance book, were really, really steamy, and I really, really enjoyed it. But the plot was not strong at all. What was interesting is that from what I did in my background research, this Hades is connected to the Hades that we see in the Dark Olympus series. So Neon Gods and Neon Gods and Electric Idol are out. So if you haven't, read those two, I mean, I don't think you have to read them in any particular order or anything like that, but there is a connection there. And I did some research to see if there was a connection. There is a connection, which I think is pretty cool. I found that interesting. But this whole plot, like this whole thing between Hades and Zeus, and Hades losing his wife and his son, and him getting Hercules because Hercules is Zeus's son, him getting Hercules as kind of a revenge plot to Zeus, it just wasn't strong. I feel like there was such a strong emphasis on the relationship aspect, which a lot of the relationship issues that the three of them have is miscommunication. And if you know me, I'm not a huge fan of the miscommunication trope, so I'm not gonna lie, like I struggled with this one a little bit. It's like a 3-star read for me because I don't really feel like much happens. Like, it was nice that we see this relationship between the three of them, and that Meg has been through a lot, especially with her ex, and she has issues trusting, and her and Hades have this really interesting dynamic, and then bringing Hercules into the situation makes it more interesting. But overall, I just don't think the book was strong in terms of plot development. So if you're going into this looking for like this mind-blowing plot about Hades, Meg and Hades, Meg and Hercules, you're not really going to get that at all. So I decided to move on to the third one, which is A Worthy Opponent, I believe. And this is the romance between Tink and Hook. I just feel like I'll never be able to look at like Disney characters the same way again, but it is a romance between Tink and Hook. And this one also, because I have like an hour left of this one on audio, and I'm struggling with this one a little bit too, because once again, like the scenes, like if you're looking for like BDSM stuff, like these are the books to kind of check out, and I love like how that aspect of the book plays out. But like if we're talking about in terms of plot, they're just not the strongest with plot development. And so we're seeing that again play out in this one, where like Tink and like Hook have a very interesting dynamic. They're very like petty towards each other, but it's clear that they're developing feelings for each other, and Hook is trying to protect her from Peter Pan. And well, his name is Peter, but we all know like it's Peter Pan, so he's trying to protect her from Peter Pan. So that, I mean, I'm feeling this is also going to be a 3-star read for me. And I'm going to continue with the series because I wanted to start her Sabine Valley series, which is connected to this series. And so I thought it was kind of necessary for me to read it, but you know, we'll see. And I also ended up finishing a contemporary book that came out last year, which I wish more people were talking about this one. This was a 4-star read for me. It is about 3 guys. 2 of them have tested positive for HIV. One has had HIV for 3 years. One tests positive for HIV at the beginning of the book, and one was in a relationship with a guy who didn't reveal his status until after the fact, and that's one of our main characters that does have HIV. I thought it's really interesting. It's a translated book. It's an import from Brazil, and it really gives great insight to like how the health system is set up to help those who have HIV in Brazil, which is completely different from the US. Like the medication that people would take who are HIV positive in Brazil is completely taken care of by the government. And of course, it's not like that here in the US. So that element alone was really interesting. This definitely has content warnings for homophobia. There's content warnings for the revealing of someone's status without their explicit permission. And so like that was a huge chunk of like the last part of the book, which is yikes. And then, you know, there's a little bit of like mental health struggles in there in terms of like dealing with knowing your status, and then or like finding out your status. And then there's also some content warnings for some kind of bigotry towards those who test HIV positive. So, and one of our main characters struggles with that, which I thought was really interesting. So it's not only just like an external thing that's going on in terms of like discrimination and bigotry towards those who are HIV positive. We also get to see it from the perspective of the main character, which I thought was completely different and very unique, because he has to work through the fact that like he has this great relationship with this guy, but this guy has also tested positive for HIV, and he's like kind of like losing his mind that this guy has tested positive for HIV, and he's like, it'll never work, the relationship would never work, and the guy's undetectable and everything like that. And it was just really, really interesting just watching their story develop. It's not really much that happens in terms of plot per se, but it is very much so a character study and an emotional study of these characters as they learn more about themselves. They learn more about those who are HIV positive and how they, you know, the community bonds together, how people perceive them. And so I thought it was just a very, very unique book, not like anything that I've read before. And it was a translated work, which I'm trying to read more translated work. So I'm happy that I was able to pick that one up. And I think like so far, like that's it. So like I said, I am A Worthy Opponent. I'm an hour away from finishing. I am also reading Confessions of an Alleged Good Girl, which is, listen, the author is amazing. I read her book last year, Excuse Me While I Ugly Cry, and adored it. And I'm really, really liking this one. This one is about first of all, religion as it applies to the Black community and purity culture, and it is so good. I am only like 40% into the book. It is so good. It really is tackling some serious things about purity culture and how it impacts how these young women and young men perceive their bodies and how they perceive things that are like completely natural. I can't wait to kind of talk about this one more, but I want to keep reading it. So I'm reading that one. I'm also in the middle, finally, I've been meaning to read this for forever, but I'm also in the middle of reading Lost Hero. I wanted to annotate, this is my second time reading it, but I wanted to annotate this copy because it's been forever since I read it. This is my old beat up, battered copy, which, you know, it is what it is. But so those are the 3 books that I kind of have in rotation for right now. I am at my parents' because it's Memorial Day weekend. And so we're cooking out right now. I'm just kind of hanging out outside. But when I have another update, I will let y'all know. Hey y'all, so I'm doing another check-in. So I did end up not talking about a book that I did finish this week, which was Harley Quinn, The Reckoning, which is one of the DC Icon books. I think it's like book 6 or 7 in the DC Icon series, and it was pretty good. I am very weary of any type of novelization of any DC or Marvel characters because usually it's done in a way that, as a more seasoned reader of comics, you don't really like enjoy it as much. But I did end up liking this version of Harley Quinn. It definitely was her origin story. She was younger, and we get to see her like in STEM and how well she did in STEM. And it's done in like flashbacks, so we get present and past, and it's a murder mystery. And Harley Quinn is trying to figure out like who's harmed her best friend slash partner. And so it was great queer rep in it as well, because if you did not know, Harley Quinn is one of DC's queer characters, originally queer, like not anything that is new to readers whatsoever in terms of Harley Quinn's sexuality. And so she's trying to figure out exactly like who harmed her partner. And so we keep going back and forth between like when Harley was first trying to get into Gotham U and then like what happened as a result. And one of her friends also ends up dying, so we're trying to figure all this stuff out. But it's a murder mystery, but then there's also some really interesting elements in terms of like Harley's like origin in terms of her parents. Her father is definitely abusive, verbally abusive. He's neglectful, so be mindful of that as content warnings. And there is some grooming and implied sexual assault that comes from professors at Gotham U, which is one of the main aspects of this book, is that it's dealing with women in STEM, but how men in STEM have historically treated women in STEM, how they are not given the same respect. They're hypersexualized, and Harley Quinn is doing this entire project where she is trying to figure out whether people have this genetic like sequence that makes them more likely to be a villain, which I think is really interesting. We do get some cameos for some great characters. Joker has some cameos in there. We do get to see a cameo of Poison Ivy, which I think is just like amazing. So from what I saw on Goodreads, we are gonna get a second book in this Harley Quinn world, which is interesting because in the other books we've only been getting one. You know, I think that most people started off reading the DC Icon books, but I think most people kind of fell off after like reading like Sarah J Maas's version. Lee Bardugo did a version and stuff like that, and Marie Lu, and so people are kind of like, whatever now. But I'm really excited to see what this author is going to do with this second book. The only thing that I had trouble with is that, and I saw someone else say this in a review, so I didn't feel like so alone in saying it, I feel like there were like no good men whatsoever in the series whatsoever. Like no good men, like nobody was good, everybody was a villain. And so it kind of like, I get the intention and the point behind it, but it was kind of like, dang, like, can we have one male character that's just not a complete jerk? So that was one of my major hiccups. But I think that I'm gonna give it a 4-star. Honestly, I was really like shifting between 3.5 and 4, but like as a starter for an origin story for people who don't really know much about Harley Quinn, who are looking for more like novelization of Harley Quinn, I think people would genuinely enjoy this story. And it's a long one. It's over 400 pages long, but it was definitely well worth the read. And I'm glad that I did make the decision to go ahead and pick that one up. I also ended up finishing A Worthy Opponent, which is by Katie Robert, which is the third book in the Wicked Villain series. I am probably going to start the fourth one, but I probably won't finish it before we wrap up this recent reads. I will carry that one over into next week, which is still partly the end of May, so I probably will finish it before the end of May, but it won't be like won't be within the time frame of this video. So it was a story, a retelling of Hook and Tinkerbell. I think I talked about that before, that it was Hook and Tinkerbell, and well, Tink and Hook. I don't know if you call her Tinkerbell, but her name is Tatiana actually, and she goes by Tink as a nickname. And he and her enter a fake marriage so that she can be protected from Peter, who was completely and totally horrible to her. I thought this is another one in the series, like kind of how I stated in like a previous clip, where like it's interesting. I think it's like, it's compelling in the sense that I think the steamy scenes between the characters are always good. There's a kind of a threesome in one of the parts that I thought was good between who would be Gaston, Hook and Tink. I thought that was really good, but these books seem to struggle greatly, and I don't remember how I truly felt about the plot with Desperate Measures, because it was my first time like really heavily getting into like darker romance, especially with like BDSM. And so I think I put that one on a higher scale because it was just my first exposure to it. But like as I've been reading more romance and getting more exposed, I think that this series is decent. Don't get me wrong, I think it is, and I absolutely adore Katie Robert, but these books really seem to struggle with a cohesive plot. Like there is a plot because clearly we have Peter trying to get to Tink, but it doesn't ever feel like flushed out. Like it feels very one-dimensional, and it doesn't seem like there's a lot that goes into it. It feels very cookie cutter. And so I end up just really enjoying more so watching the relationships develop between these characters than actually like focusing on the plot at all. Like I end up really not caring about the plot. And it was kind of the same thing in this, where like I didn't really care about the plot. I didn't really care about what happened between Peter and Tink, and like the ending, it just was kind of like, I don't really care. Like I just want my HEA for Tink and Hook, which I did get, and I thought that they were cute because these two had this incredible banter. They really don't care for each other. It's kind of like they have this attraction to each other, but it's a push and pull because part of they can't stand each other, but you can see them kind of break these walls down, and they become really, really like sensitive with each other. So the relationship aspects of these books are always done very, very well, the emotional connections. And so I think, like, I gave the second book a 3-star. I may give this one a 3.5 because I just thought that the character development in this one was a little bit better. I think the relationship between Meg, Hades, and Hercules was a lot of miscommunication, and I am not a huge fan of miscommunication, so I probably will rate this one a little bit higher. So I'm thinking about a 3.5 stars. I haven't written my review yet. The next thing that I read, which you saw in the clip, was a graphic novel called I forgot the name of it, y'all. Oh my gosh, I know it's Adora. Adora in the Distance, or Adora Goes the Distance, or I think it's Adora in the Distance, whatever. So it basically is this fantastical story of this young black girl who is having these nightmares, and it's this thing called the distance that keeps trying to come after her. And in order for her to be able to protect the world that she was living in, like the kingdom that she was living in, she makes the decision to leave so the distance doesn't attack them. And so plot wise, I just had a lot of issues with how it would jump around. I don't think that the plot was written seamlessly or cohesively, to be honest with you, because there were some sections where it would jump in time, and I was like, I'm confused about how we got from point A to point B. So really, while I was reading the whole thing, I was like, this is confusing a little bit, and I don't know how I really feel about it. And so this is probably going to be spoilers, so if you want, you can kind of skip over to the next section, the next thing that I review, because I don't want you to be spoiled. But I think it's important to know this going into this graphic novel if you do decide to pick it up. So there is a plot twist in all of this. And the plot twist is that none of this world of Adora, none of it was real. It literally was all in her head because she's autistic. And so we see her parents dealing with her going through therapy and her being nonverbal. And I originally was gonna, keeping it 100, I originally was gonna give this like 3.5. But I went back and I read some reviews from people who identify as autistic, and they were really, really disappointed in the representation and the language that was used and how ableist it was. And so this one, I actually left it unrated because I have not lived that experience, nor am I a parent of a child that's autistic. So the author wrote this in keeping his autistic daughter in mind and his experience in raising an autistic daughter. And in the author's note, he talks a little bit about the fact that he struggles. Him and his family struggled. It's a learning process for them, and like their daughter was diagnosed with autism at 2.5 years old, and they said everything was pretty standard for what they assumed like raising an autistic child was going to be, except for the fact that I think she ended up being nonverbal. And so he was trying to figure out, like, in her mind what was happening when like she would laugh, you know, without anything being said by anybody in the room, and like sometimes she'd burst out into tears. So like what exactly was going through her mind? Like what world was she living in and experiencing when she wasn't really communicating with her parents and her family? And so while I don't think his intention was to be ableist, and I don't think that he meant it to be harmful, he was speaking from his personal experience in being a parent of an autistic child. I think that it wasn't executed well, and a lot of people who are autistic like really didn't take well to the rep. So I left that one unrated. I usually don't leave many things unrated, but I did with that one. And so yeah, it's just something to keep in mind going in. But in terms of other things that I have going on, hi, hola. In terms of other things that I have going on, I am still reading The Lost Hero, as you can see here. I am annotating it like crazy. I'm about 100 pages in. I'm not going to finish this, of course, by the time this week's reads. By the time we get through this week's reads, I am not going to be able to finish this one, unfortunately. and so it will carry over into next week. But I'm enjoying my reread. I'm picking up on a lot of things that I didn't pick up, I think, on in my first read. Like, Annabeth is not my fave. Like, she's like kind of looking mean in this book. So I kind of sort of, because, you know, Percy has gone missing and she's not really like coping with it well, but she's really mean to Jason. And I don't know, Annabeth is kind of a little bit of different. But yeah, so this is from the perspective of Jason, Leo, and also Piper. And I am I forgot about the representation in this. So Piper is Native Am, Leo is Latino, and Jason is white. And they all have very, very interesting abilities that we don't get to see with the first round of characters in the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series. And so I'm really, really digging that. And there's some things that I do remember about the two different camps, one Roman, one Greek, but I can't remember explicit details. So it's been really fun going through and really like figuring out what I remember and what I don't remember. And it's a lot of stuff I just really don't remember, but nevertheless, I am enjoying it. So I'm going to sit out here for a little while outside, and I'm going to try to make it to my next section. So when I annotate my books, a lot of times, like every 50 to 75 pages, I will make a summary. And so I'm on my next 50 to 75 pages that I need to read in order to do another summary. So I'm going to try to make it through that, which probably by the time we finish this recent reads, I'm hoping that I will be closer to page 200, and then I'll go ahead and knock out the rest of this going into next week. I don't know what else I'm going to read before today is over with, but I will do a final check-in probably later, and we'll go ahead and we'll wrap this one up. Hey y'all, so this is the final clip for this week's recent reads. I know I'm wearing the same dress, I promise you it has been washed. It's just, I'm doing the final clip on the day that this is actually gonna go up, so this is interesting. And you hear the washing machine very loudly. So the last thing that I ended up reading this week was Luna by Maria Lovett. This was a 2-star read for me. I didn't really like it. It is about a young woman who ends up in an accident. She connects with this weird cult group in the middle of the desert, and they have some like weird vampiric type of thing going on where they've chained up a god. It's weird. It is the weirdest thing ever. Like, I felt like I needed to be inebriated to understand this book. It was awful. There was a lot of flowery language to cover up the fact that there was no plot. The artwork is actually beautiful. I thought the artwork was nice. It really was. The artwork was nice. The color palette was nice. The story just made absolutely no sense. And I think I knew that a couple people who like I follow on CommentTube like did not like Luna, but my library got the trade, so I was like, I'm just gonna read it and see how it feels. And it was awful, y'all. So 2 stars. Anyway, peace. That is it for this week's recent reads. I will be back again next week. Next week's recent reads is going to be kind of weird because it's going to be split between 2 months, but whatever, that's perfectly fine. As always, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more content from me, click the subscribe button, hit the bell for notifications. If you want to support my channel, I have a Patreon link and Amazon wishlist down in the description box below. I'll be back with another video soon.